It's so wonderful to see all of your faces this morning after a weekend of hard work, I'm sure. And we're excited to see your presentations. Before that, we're going to introduce our distinguished panel of judges, just so you know who will be evaluating your projects. Starting off with the health category, we have Dr. Ian Wong, Assistant Professor in Pulmonary Allergy and Critical Care Medicine and Translational Biomedical Informatics at Duke University, and a member of the BOLD research team. We have Dr. Marie Lo Champignon, who recently completed her PhD at the Social and Engineering Systems program at the MIT IDSS, and is also a member of the BOLD research team. We have Joao Matos, PhD student at Oxford and member of the BOLD research team. We have Joanna Brownstein, founder of and principal at Brownstein Consulting LLC, and founder of and executive coach at Succeed Studio, as well as a member for the MIT Sloan Healthcare Lab. And finally, we have Lisa Abrams, Director of Communications at the MIT Sloan Health Systems Initiative. I will pass it off to Albert Chen, our Director for Climate, to introduce our climate judges for today.
For our climate challenge, we have Dr. David Galston. He's Director of the MIT Washington office, and Nadia Martin, Floodplain Management Specialist in the Department of Conservation and Recreation, and Dr. Adam Schlosser, Senior Researcher Scientist in the Center of Sustainability Science and Strategy.
And now Nathan Collette, our Director for Housing, will present our judges for the Housing Challenge.
Thanks so much. I'm super thrilled to recognize a couple people that are here from Massachusetts and New York. So first, Andrew Staniforth, the CEO of Assembly OSM, and who's also the sponsor of our challenge, as well as Paige Rusa from the Mayor's Housing Innovation Lab of the City of Boston. She's the director there. And then Kelly Murphy and Emily Brown, who are program managers at the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, which is the state's sort of flagship building decarbonization and kind of support organization.
Thank you, Nathan. And finally, to present our judges for the final challenge, criminal justice reform, we have Yael Cervantes.
Well, first I want to introduce Lily Laveras. She has a lot of experience on data science. She's actually data science team lead in the Gemini data science team at Google. I think you all already know Aparna. I also wanted to thank her about all the time that she gave to all our participants. I know that a lot of you already have your questions answered by her. So yeah, thank you very much, Aparna. And finally, I want to introduce Carlota. Carlota is a graduate student over here at MIT with a background on technology and policy. And she has also a degree in mathematics and physics from the Polytechnic. So I think with that, if you can please give me a round of applause for our judges. For the presentations, we need participants to project with their voices because we have some people joining online, so we're using this microphone. So yeah, we cannot use this microphone, but the judges are here, so I'm sure that they will hear you.
Okay, good morning. We are Team Ox Equity, and we're looking to enhance pulse oximeter evaluation metrics to improve accuracy and reduce disparities. So pulse oximeters are used to detect oxygen levels in the blood. They are an alternative to a more invasive gold standard used blood draws. Unfortunately, populations with darker skin color suffer from systematic disparities associated with inaccurate measurements, and this can actually lead to misdiagnoses and disparate outcomes as well. So, for example, black patients have 3 times the frequency of misdiagnoses of hypoxemia than white patients do, and there are significant costs associated with this. So if you look at this figure here on the right, what this shows is the proportion of patients in the GOLD data set who have the worst kind of misclassification, where their pulse ox measurements says their blood ox is normal, and the GOLD standard says they're actually in a critical state of low oxygenation. And the current performance metric used by the FDA to evaluate pulse oximeters does very well at saying, oh, generally your errors shouldn't be too big, but it doesn't account for these crucial misclassification errors, and it doesn't account for disparate performance along demographic lines. So our central concept is to separate into demographic groups and then identify the ones for which device performance is most problematic. And we define most problematic as where the types of misclassifications that can occur between pulse ox measurements and the gold standard. The problematic ones, those misdiagnoses, are the highest proportion. And you can see, so we've done this for 60 different subgroups, and we've shown actually distributions generated from bootstrapping to look at distributions for 3 different groups. Ideally, all of these distributions would be very narrow and tall and as far enough as possible, but that's not what we see. So our recommendation is to use this measurement, which we call problematic misalignment proportion, or PMP. We want to make a slight change to the existing metric, AMRS, to use weighting of the error terms in a way that is proportionate to the PMP, so we can proportionally represent individuals who are parts of groups that have this disparate impact. We can also apply this to pre-market studies by using the PMP to help determine, in conjunction with the study size and other design considerations, what kind of representation from these groups is needed. We think this is feasible, it's incrementable, it's achievable by working within the current system. It will require very low effort in terms of changes by clinicians, changes in the way things are calculated, and will work to ensure that all populations have equitable health measurements. It can be applied to all.
Thank you, Team Ox Equity. Our second health challenge, Team Deep Breath. Hi everyone, we're starting the second presentation. Thank you.
So my name is Caitlin. I'm Michelle.
I'm Hezekiah.
And we're going to deep breath. So, as we said before, with the previous team, pulse oximetry is important. Humans need oxygen to survive. How do we measure this oxygen? Pulse oximeters, which are the devices, go on your finger. These devices can tell if someone needs to be admitted to hospital or whether they need oxygen therapy. If there is an error in this device, we can miss people who might be admitted to hospital and who might need oxygen therapy. This results in worse outcomes. In fact, there are certain populations that have higher error rating than pulse oximeter. For example, one study found that Black patients were 29% less likely to be recognised for COVID treatment compared to other ethnicities. But what are these features that determine the error rates? These are just some examples of some possible features. If we know these features that determine whether someone has a higher or a lower error in their pulse oximeter, this can be used by the FDA for approval and validation of new devices. But it can also be used by clinicians to determine whether they can trust the pulse oximeter reading and whether they should admit or give someone hospital. We found in the bold data set that there's systematic error in racial groups. We found that Black ethnicities had significantly higher error rates compared to all other ethnicities.
Yeah, so we've already covered some of the issues with current state-of-the-art measures, the reliability of pulse oximetry readings. So we provide a far more intelligent detection method called Pulse Connect, where basically we have over 44,000 patients, right? They're coming from different backgrounds, different comorbidities. We take them from this high-dimensional space and group them together by similarity, and we find that we can actually train an unsupervised algorithm to actually learn highly interpretable, highly predictive collection of these data that should then allow us to understand more about what the data is that we're training on, but also generalize to new and unseen populations. We're fairly confident that this kind of work will help us to reduce the amount of bias that is perpetually inherent in these current pulse oximetry devices.
So now that we've understood about what, how, and why we want to understand the SpO2 error rates and how they bring an impact into people's lives, let's talk about what we can do to make them better predictions in the future. Starting with, we can update FDA standards to overrepresent high-risk error rate populations so that we can enable recalibration of pulse oximeters, collaborating with pulse oximeter manufacturers to make sure these high error rate risk populations are taken into account more. Educate the clinics to make sure they use our data-driven solution to understand the error rate that they will be getting when they use pulse oximeter to account for SpO2 readings for high-risk populations. And of course, fund research to make
Thank you, team. Deep breath.
Hi everyone, my name is Mira. We're going to be pulse oxymorons, and we'll be talking about reducing racial bias in pulse oximeters. So as you all know, pulse oximetry is used to diagnose things like low blood oxygen, a condition called hypoxemia, and it will determine whether or not people need, whether or not a clinical intervention is necessary or not. And a very important thing is this critical range distinguishes whether or not you have hypoxemia or not. The other thing is that this metric is sensitive to skin pigmentation and often overestimates the true value. Unfortunately, historically, this metric is designed to just benefit light-skinned people, with only light people in mind. And so we need pulse oximeters that work for everyone. And our policy goals are to build better pulse oximeters that work regardless of skin pigmentation. And part of that involves setting new performance-based metrics, and also just recruiting more diverse patients for clinical trials for new pulse oximeters. And the key idea that we want to bring here is that race and ethnicity are bad proxies for skin pigmentation. They cannot confidently predict the errors that we learned in our metric. And these types of metrics are already actually being removed in other medical contexts. And we need a metric that actually corrects for errors in the status quo that are affecting the most vulnerable. And the status quo right now is arms, as you've all heard. And the problems that we have found with this is that it thinks that overestimation is just as bad as underestimation. And it says that accuracy requirements are constant across the range of measurements and ignoring clinically relevant critical ranges. And what happens is you get overestimation in this critical range, which leads to a false positive, which leads to dangerous misobservations in vulnerable populations. And so we are going to correct this metric through a new approach.
So my name is Austin. We're going to take you through our new W-armed approach. It stands for weighted accuracy root squared. And it's exactly what it sounds like. Instead of taking a uniform mean of the errors, we assign two weight functions. They're pretty simple. The first one assigns penalties for overestimation to address one of the problems that we mentioned earlier. The second one, V, is a Gaussian that concentrates and amplifies errors that are closer to the critical range between 88 and 92% pulse ox. And the advantages are obviously this corrects for it makes overestimation errors worth more, and it requires a higher degree of accuracy around our critical range. So these are a couple graphs showing how our W-armed method is more cautious. So this line here is the percentage chance that the person is experiencing a low blood oxygen event. And as you can see, we get to a higher point earlier on. So if somebody has like a 93% reading, but the margin of error is like plus or minus 4%, then we say, okay, well, maybe we need to take a blood reading. And so our long-term proposals are, we need to measure skin pigmentation and engage with hospitals to collect this information, and we need to elevate and fund projects to increase visibility and testing of this technology. So, thank you.
Thank you, team. Welcome our fifth and final team for the health challenge, team number 5.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sujana, and I'm here to represent the team Decisive Leftovers. The reason why we came up with that name is we made a very decisive choice of choosing this topic. However, we were the last one in line, so I'm glad we got the leftover piece of the topic, which that we wanted. So in terms of, we've identified the problem where these oximeters are not able to able to detect accuracy for a small population, which is sensitive to 2 to 12% of the population, and we want to target this population group because they are important. When we try to put a number to it, we identify that 1 million people with high pigmentation, brown or black skin color might be affected because of this inaccuracy, and that is the problem that our team is trying to address. Ever since COVID, we have seen that spike and oximeters in everyone's household, and 80% of these oximeters are located in our household, so we need to make informed decisions. So our policy is regarding twofold. One is to work with FDA, so we have a more uniform metrics. So the current standard is, the FDA only requires 24 data points, patients, and 200 data points in total, with only 2 Black individuals required, or 15% of that demographic, which isn't enough, right? We have variations in melanin pigmentations within the same ethnicity. So what our team is proposing is having at least 40% people of different skin tones to do these calibrations, and we want to work with FDA to promote more transparency in this process for medical device providers, so that we have that implemented and centralized systems. The second aspect for both of our last 2 points is we want to empower the patients to make those calls, especially because we do have oximeters in everyone's household, 80% of them. So the twofold is, if you know you are of a different skin color, which is not white, we recommend having 2 points for detection for accuracy. And the second is we analyzed the bold data set, which kind of gave us understanding. We did a linear regression model for ethnicity, and it is a categorical variable. And as I mentioned, ethnicity has variation within itself, and it's not a good metrics for us to identify. There was, even though the discrepancy between the gold standard of invasive and non-invasive looks linear, we see the variations in the data points, which is not reliable. There's a skew in the bold data point where we see it has mostly larger age group data. And what we're trying to avoid is the overestimation case, where we are risking people who might have low oxygen level, but the oximeter is giving higher oxygen level. And that's the population size that we're trying to target. So what our linear model was not giving us is a good metrics for it. So what we propose, and this is our MVP, is having an open source data. Even though the bold data set did not give us good linear relationship, our vision is that we have developed this app yesterday where if you input age, race, sex, and religion, it gives you a % accuracy of this oximeter, which should be available to all mass populations. So we are able to de-risk, and we are comfortable in our homes in the accuracy for data.
Thank you, team number 5.
Thank you so much.
Please join us in giving another round of applause to all of our health group. Now, great presentations from our health teams. Now let's change gears to climate. And for our climate change challenge, the topic is about integrating climate resilience into Massachusetts infrastructure and land use, a water-smart approach to equitable growth. So let's welcome our first team of climate change.
Good morning, everyone. We are from DRIP, Disaster Readiness Incentive Program, from Abe's Lincoln team. When I'm thinking about climate, it's not about people up there. It's not about the developers in big business, in a big company. But I'm thinking about people, marginalized community, minority population, low-income people who lives in our community along with us. The flood is one disaster that affect them. And we try to compile, we try to consolidate these variables, these indicators, to bring where are they, the most prioritized community on risk on this climate change disaster. We propose these 4 policies to develop, to reduce, to improve, and to pair. To develop community awareness, through youth empowerment, to reduce impermeable surfaces, which is also related to land use and also to land intervention, to improve local water quality. This is both for the household use and also for the human consumption, hence the smart water concept, and also to pair public and private partnership. This is combining and consolidating two sectors to create a role in infrastructure protection. How we can do this? We want to offer stormwater planters. Two types, portable and the big one which developed in the public space and green areas. This is to be applied to the develop, reduce, improve, and pairing concepts of our policies. Operational scheme that we propose after the policies agreed to be implemented. We offer grant entity bonus, grant personal tax break for this both to developers and homeowners.
I just want to emphasize that when we talk about community and especially equity and inclusion in environmental justice, that means no voice goes unheard. And so I took all of these numbers and I decided to make my own version of data by cold calling members of this community. And after gaining their insight and comparing it to parsing the public comments on the Wetlands Program Protection Act, I realized that talking to people works. And going back to what we learned in Earth Hacks of using our grandma's hacks that they gave us when we were kids, we need to talk to each other more. And I think that our policies drip, it kind of addresses the keynote question of what would aliens do? They would have fun with it. They would have gardens of stored water plants, and then they would take youth empowerment and go up from there.
Now we're excited to welcome team number 2 in the Climate Challenge, Los Bujos de Rice.
Hi, my name is Juan, I'm from the School of the Rights, and today I want to talk about how we tackle inequity impact on water-related hazards. So, let's start with the problem. We talked about resilience. Resilience is what farming needs to withstand the impact of floods and drought year after year. Now, what if we could turn these two opposing problems into an opportunity? Take flood water as an actual lifeline for drought seasons. Now, our problem comes in where we talk about inequity communities, human communities, where inequity is a problem in language, in ethnicity, in income, and they suffer because they lack access to the proper infrastructure, but also to having a say in how they're represented within the policy-making process. Now, our first proposal is a water treatment plant, a counter-cyclical buffer. These are not just plants, these are growth engines. They mitigate the risk, but they also foster positive economic impact by spillover effects like job creation, while also being equity drivers, because we have known where these communities with inequality are, and we're going after them. Now, how does this work? We get water up to 99.9 purity%. And they fill up just like our phones do. When flood hits, these plants fill up with water, they process it, and when drought season comes, we can feed all the demand for that water. However, there's another aspect to it, representation, and that's why we want to have communities involved. Now, we went for scale. We use machine learning to identify where the communities with the most exposure to water-related hazards and suffering from inequality are located, and we're going after them. We want to make sure they are represented. Our infrastructure solution is real, replicable, and scalable because we have the designs and we are ready to implement. And our community involvement solutions are also real, replicable, and scalable because we know where these people are. So the objective is met. Equity is finally achievable. We can mitigate risk, and we can foster civic engagement. We can make that people work alongside governments when making public policy. So to wrap up, I think that there's a bit of misconception here. We started with the problem of water as water-related hazards, but water is not a hazard. Water is a resource, and we should better talk about it in a climate challenge, right? So let's make it, and let's make sure that we use it to the best of our extent. We treat water, we satisfy demand, but we make sure that people are present in the process when we make that a real thing. Thank you very much.
welcome team number 3 in the climate challenge, climate techies.
Hello everyone, this is Team Climate Hackathon. Imagine it's 8 a.m. in the morning. I'm going to my class in UMass Boston. The Bushy Boulevard is all river, it's all flooded. Everyone is rerouting, the buses are rerouting, and student has just one goal, to reach their college. This is exactly what I experienced last September. At the same time, one of my friends from Worcester texted me saying the drought problem, the water scarcity. To one state, 2 communities, just 2 completely different climate and water problems. This is an incident? No. An accident? No. What it is, it's a serious thing. Our map shows the distribution of water system gap in Massachusetts. 3 small communities, including Ipswich, are pushed to their limits. They have unfair funding leads to small communities at risk of water shortage.
Suggests that there's material inequality in between the communities and affluent communities and small communities as seen in the graphic. And also, even though we have all this data coming from different sources, like the government of Massachusetts, there's no way for us to visualize in a more user-friendly way where we can see all this data coming in and we can gain actionable insights for communities and stakeholders. And we see that there's
And we propose the following recommendations. SMAP, Soil Moisture Active Tracer. It's a satellite designed by NASA to measure the soil moisture across all regions in America, and it helps predict droughts and flood risks. We will also be leveraging a very important indices known as Drought Vulnerability Index and Flood Resilience Index. The valuable insights provided by these indices are derived to multi-faceted data, incorporating environmental and socioeconomic factors, emphasizing on underserved communities. All insights are fed into a centralized climate resilience dynamic dashboard that provides early warnings, visualize risks, and support smart resource allocation. And finally, we address the problem of the green workforce development.
So previous slide suggested we proposed a green workforce development program for the underserved community to foster the inclusive workforce growth and climate resilience within the city. The question would be why? Because it addresses 2 critical needs of this community. First, we tackle the unemployment problem, which provides income incentive for them to participate, and also foster water smart growth within the community. There's some existing programs and initiatives in Massachusetts. However, they have issues such as a lack of program opportunities specifically for the community. Therefore, we suggest a recommendation such as providing long-term programs through public-private partnership specifically for the underserved community to close that gap.
Thank you very much.
We'd like to welcome team number 4, Noah's Policy.
Hello everyone, we are Noah's Policy, and today we're going to discuss how we can better understand risk to inform decision making. So when conceptualizing this problem, we recognized that there were some significant gaps in data coordination and understanding. We noticed there was an absence of a singular information source for climate risk assessment that could then assist decision makers in identifying threats posed by climate change. So in order to solve this, we first created a tool and a metric known as Risk Plus, which is a relative scoring methodology developed for climate risk factors. So a score of 100 is average, with a 1 unit increase indicating a 1% higher risk compared to average. So for example, as you see here, we have Middlesex County, and we see that Middlesex County has a water quality risk of 130. So what this means is that Compared to other Massachusetts counties, Middlesex County has a 30% higher likelihood of having its water quality affected by climate change relative to the rest of Massachusetts, or relative to the rest of the counties in Massachusetts. And what's nice about this is that we can adjust Risk Plus to the scope of what we want to look at, whether that is cities and zip codes relative to counties, counties relative to the state, and ultimately states relative to the country. And a unique feature of this is that we are then able to forecast Risk Plus out to 10 years to better inform future decision making.
We present the Risk Plus dashboard, a consolidated tool to analyze a range of measures and at a more granular level. Climate risks are presented at a county level on the top panel, which signifies a common shared threat that all of us face. But for different levels of administration to be able to develop an effective strategy for risk mitigation, we need to be able to analyze a range of indicators at a zip code level. And we're able to access multiple dimensions for this level of granularity. We recommend a visualization strategy that can toggle between this faceted view for side-by-side analysis and an optional map overlay. So we recommend against using a joint distribution that might obscure details unless they are weighted appropriately and very sensitively to demographic increase. Climate response is a complex challenge, and our goal is to enable complex analysis to catch the smallest of our vulnerable populations and their needs.
We correct information failure by using.
Thank you, Team NOAA's Policy.
Hi everyone. Charles is one of the many lifelines of Massachusetts. However, due to high rising temperatures, low precipitation levels, and higher water withdrawals, this region is currently in high water stress. And so is the case with most of the other watershed areas in Massachusetts, with climate projection risk going very high across the next upcoming decades. We took temperature risk, precipitation risk, and the safe use utilization rate to come up with a composite risk score across all the watersheds, and we found that Charles and Nashua, both of these watersheds, scored the highest risk score. Now, both these watersheds currently depend heavily on groundwater and surface water as the water sources. And with the climate projections going up, there is a very high chance that the groundwater and the surface water, they have a very high chance of being depleted in the future. Now, in order to understand flooding, we also look at the FEMA flood risk data and the wetland data. So this represents even a 1% annual chance of being flooded. Now, this might seem like a small number, but over a 30-year period, this comes up to 26% chance of being flooded. And looking at the wetland areas, now wetlands act as very important buffers in the flooding. However, if they sort of get reduced, or if we construct a lot of housing around this area, they sort of a high risk of being flooded. We also took a look at the housing which are around high-risk flood areas and the zoning regulations. There is an error in the legend, but this purple represents the flood risk and the orange represents housing. As you can see, there's a lot of construction in and around the very high risk flood area. And the zoning laws have not been updated since 1970. So it's something that we have not updated, and they need to take into account all of these vulnerabilities, all of these high-risk flood areas. But who is going to face the impact the most? So we analyzed the environmental justice data, and we looked at low median income households and areas where there is a high percentage of minorities. But we can also look at areas with high elderly population. There are people with disabilities and medical illness, people with children and infants who are at higher risk. Now I'll question.
Massachusetts is at a tipping point where several water threats have become water crises. Aqua Equity has developed a 4-pillar wraparound system to promote water-smart development for and by the community. Our pillars are inclusive. Our first pillar uses community intelligence to include community members in water-smart development. We propose including community members on committees such as land development and zoning use approval committees so that their voice is heard in decisions that will affect the neighborhoods that they live in. We also want to retool the 311 municipal app so that community members can report on water metrics for incentives such as vouchers for local events and local vendors. Our pillars are also inviting.
Thank you, Team Aqua Equity. Our next team, Aqua Event.
So we are addressing the problems of Massachusetts state's government role in creating water smart growth that is resilient to climate risks such as drought and flooding, and ensuring equitable solutions. We address this problem through equity, sustainability, and water conservation in the housing industry.
So Massachusetts is facing the effects of climate change. There's been a 1,200% increase in wildfires, 400,000 residents live in areas with future flooding risks, and environmental justice populations living near industrial infrastructure face a 57% higher risk of flooding. This map is one of many we created to inform data-driven and policy-driven solutions for these climate impacts and for the state's future water growth.
So let's move on to our solutions. With political feasibility and cost considerations, we recommend to improve existing solutions in the following 2 areas. The first one is better to address the needs of marginalized groups, and the second is focusing on developer behavior to achieve long-term sustainability. So we first recommend to enhance the MustGIS water dashboard. The current dashboard already has some climate and environmental justice data, but we still need to incorporate more metrics to bring the previously invisible groups into consideration. And also more climate and geographic data also needed to inform future initiatives and repairs. And my team made the calculator. And the second solution is adjust the existing housing development incentive system. We recommend to adjust sustainable development criteria into the tax credit solution. So in order to incentivize developers to adopt more climate conscious and water efficient green practices.
So the top graph is an example of how we overlay different variables to see more patterns that we can allow government officials to make decisions especially when there's an emergency and we need to target specific areas quickly. So we also noticed that in the MassGIS dashboard that already exists, there's a lot of the environmental justice population data is very minimal. For example, they'll have low income, however they won't have specific income levels. So we recommend adding those and we have a minimal value of overlaying these various variables. And this will also help in the projected climate statistics when we're making these graphs to help make informed decisions.
Thank you, Team Aqua.
Hello, everyone. Does that tap look familiar to you, a leaky tap? As a Massachusetts renter, that tap is intimately familiar for me. So I wondered how many of us have this issue. So I texted my friends all over the state and asked them 2 questions. Did you know we're going through a critical drought? And do you have a leak in your apartment? And out of 50 folks, 42 said they did not know that we were going through a critical drought. And 30 said that they had a leak in their apartment. In major cities like Boston, Cambridge, and Somerville, renters account for 60% of residents. And they are not in direct contact with the maintenance of their buildings. Normally, it's an afterthought. And even though it's a quote-unquote easy problem to solve, it's not super accessible because marginalized folks tend to live in areas with food droughts, with energy depletion areas, and so water saving is an afterthought. Take me for instance, it took me a week to solve that leak, partly because of an afterthought, partly because I could not get in contact with my landlord, partly because I was here. But within the calculations, and leaky pipes can leak up to 640,000 gallons a month. And that is an equivalent of doing 45,000 showers. Take that in mind. So what do we propose? Firstly, we want to change existing regulations, such as 12.109, changing the urgency of when you should respond to a deep set crisis. We want to incentivize landlords to conserve more water and introduce programs that can help adopting water sense systems and smart water meters. We also want to use funding via existing policies, such as the payment in lieu of taxes program, a voluntary contribution by tax organizations, which can allow these renters to get access to some of these policies. Now, we love the fact that the EA is on X, formerly Twitter. But now it's time to move to TikTok, because that's where most of us get our information from. And for all the 40 people who did not know that we are going through a drought, we need to understand that these folks get information from other media. And let's start a podcast too while we're at it. Not only that, we need to understand that we get our information from folks who already know it. So indigenous communities who have been here for a long period of time, we need their knowledge and let them give us the access that we need in order to create programs that can create awareness. And when speaking of awareness, we want to create a specialized system where you can use rainwater harvesting, smart meters, which is connected to an app that can tell you the amount of risks that you are going through, leaks in your household, and all these systems, while also creating jobs for people who are interested in that industry. So thank you so much. Every drop in the field is an ocean. So let's use our time to save the planet. Thank you.
Quite a difficult assignment, I'm going to be honest. We turned over a bunch of unstructured data from a company building real houses in a completely different way. So financing, supply chain, procurement, timelines, a whole bunch of new construction materials that even if they were familiar with the field, they may not have encountered before. And we asked them to look at the data and identify the greatest technological or policy-related barriers to scaling and improving on the innovation that's happening in real life in New York City right now. And then based on that analysis, we wanted them to come up with some sort of new idea or way of moving this type of innovation along, and then use this company's data as a case study to show how it would impact the industry as a whole. Okay, so I'm excited to welcome up our first team, and take it away.
Hi everyone, we are Team Ground Up, and we're here to talk to you about streamlining modular housing deployment in the United States with a specific focus on New York City. So let's start with the problem. There is a housing crisis in the United States driven by 3 factors: housing shortage, lack of affordability, and climate change. Currently, New York City is on track to need 560,000 new housing units by 2030, and modern construction cannot keep up with that. Along with rising housing prices and global emissions, it's clear that we need a greener, more cost-effective solution to build housing, and that is modular.
Although modular has already been shown to be better than traditional construction methods in several ways, it still faces significant challenges in its early stages due to high cost constraints, which may lead to financing hesitancy. This is why we think it's very important to connect assembly with the places it matters the most. We wanted to create an atlas tool that provides an opportunity score based on a couple of factors, including friendly zoning areas, housing demand, income change, as well as emission and energy usage. These variables were chosen with the intention of getting ahead of potential community displacement and to target areas where there is a lot of emission.
Cool. So we took publicly available data sets on these 4 categories, and we generated individual maps for finding the state of New York. So coming up with some really cool transitions here. So we took these individual maps and essentially overlaid them together to produce areas of intense color, which kind of tells us what the optimal hotspot for modular housing deployment is. And so kind of future goals with this is kind of increasing our data set that we have, spanning not just in New York City, but across the United States. We're also going to be including parameters that are not here, to include things like more budgets, regional variability in budgets, and things like that. So, yeah.
So once again, we'll be streamlining our code compliance by using our opportunity map to look at optimal locations to cut down on these permitting processing timelines. And this is a part of our short-term plan, which also hinges on creating a modular or alternative housing commissioner who will help detail and lead this process. We'll introduce this as a pilot program, and as mentioned, we'll be updating our opportunity map with more data and parameters, as well as reassessing priority areas every 5 years to keep up with evolving housing needs. This also works in tandem with our long-term plan for pushing for federal standardization of modular housing, building codes to eliminate inconsistencies.
Thank you, Team Ground Up.
Thank you.
Frameworkers.
Morning, everyone. We are the Frameworkers. So the context of the problem that we're looking to solve is the national housing crisis. So that's where the challenge comes in. And one of the potential solutions to this crisis is creating cost-efficient scaling methods for next-generation housing. So let's start with the data. What we're looking at here is a comparison of conventional and modular construction costs across multiple different categories. The main one I want you to look at is in the top right. So this is the total project cost when you compare conventional and modular. You can see that modular is 1.2 million more expensive. So the question is why? And that's when we turn to the policy. So the policy informs the finances, and that's what we have the power to change. The first change that we would recommend is revising the outdated building codes. Specifically in the United States, most of the building codes are prescriptive-based. They have a lot of stringent specifications and ratings, and it doesn't leave a lot of room for innovation. If we implement performance-based and outcome-based codes, all you have to do is meet the minimum safety specification, and that way you can unlock innovation needed for more affordable and scalable solutions. The next thing that we'd like to implement is going to be introducing energy-efficient incentives, updated energy-efficient incentives. So a lot of new next-gen housing is inherently more energy efficient, making them eligible for any green real estate tax credits. It should be a huge win, but it's really only a huge win for smaller developments like single family. When you look at larger projects like multifamily or things of that nature, it doesn't necessarily scale financially to make a significant impact on your costs. And in light of the next administration, we wanted to steer clear of solutions that involve spending more money on the federal level. So we're turning to the states. From the state level, we like to develop tailored programs to help incentivize companies that are building energy efficiency programs, whether that's rebates, whether that's backstop funds, to get to these initiatives in states like New York that have already implemented those. So when you wrap it all up, you take these two policies, do some cost estimates, and you go back to the initial graph that we showed in the very beginning. Just with these changes, modular cost goes down 1.4 million. So this is marginal for one building. But take this logic, apply it over tens, hundreds, and thousands of developments over the course of 10 years, and that's how you can really break into this ecosystem in a sustainable way. Take the policy and inform the finances. Thank you, everyone.
Please welcome to the stage.
Hello. Nothing in this world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. This applies to everything. When I came to this country, I was scared, and now I love this country. So from your parents saying, don't talk to strangers, so 20 years from now, they're asking you to book an Uber with a complete stranger. When compared to traditional construction, assemblies, OSM's modern housing technology is sugar, spice, and everything nice. It's faster, cheaper, more sustainable. Despite of its clear advantages, it's facing barriers for developers, insurers, and lenders.
Why? Because these key players in the industry have not had enough exposure to and are therefore ignorant of the size of the opportunity that modular housing presents, especially when tackling housing affordability and therefore supply. Today, New York City faces a crisis with over 500,000 affordable housing units needed to meet demand by 2030. The average nurse or teacher earns between $75,000 and $100,000 annually. Yet the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in New York City is over $3,000 per month. Therefore, essential workers are struggling to afford rent in the very city they serve. Our solution is simple yet transformative. We propose creating the Modular Housing Fund, a $200 million initiative in partnership with Assembly OSM, essential worker unions, the city and state of New York, insurers, and private investors. The goal to construct about 1,500 affordable modular apartments for essential workers over the next 5 years, with 10% of units reserved at a reduced rent of $1,300 per month. This collaborative investment pools resources from public and private sectors to reduce risk by distributing it, providing guaranteed returns of 5% annually for investors while reducing costs through partnerships with unions to provide a guaranteed market and leverage existing government incentives.
So the beauty of our solution lies in its viability and scalability. This fund ensures stable rental income while generating long-term returns. For investors, this means a projected 15x ROI over 7 years. And for unions, in addition to this, they're supporting their members and providing housing to them. For us, the real value of this proposal is actually in its ability to convince the current players in the market who are nervous that modular housing works. It's viable, it's a better alternative to traditional housing. And we do this through their active involvement in the fund. They have to sit on the board, they have to understand fundamentally how modular housing works. That exposure and that knowledge means that they can then go on to create tailored products for their customers on future modular housing customers. So our project doesn't just aim to build housing, it aims to change perceptions. We prove the viability of it. We pave the way for its adoption across the country and internationally by demystifying those risks and driving innovation in the sector. So if ignorance breeds fear, then knowledge can drive the change that we need in the sector.
However, there are barriers to do so. There are like financial constraints, and there are also like policy constraints as well as technical constraints. So how do we tackle it to make modular housing more at a large scale?
Yes, so we as a team, we did extensive research, and ultimately we would like to suggest 2 main recommendations. First one is we want to target affordable social housing, especially in vulnerable areas, because not only can we convince local governments to subsidize and invest in these valuable neighborhoods, but we can also already create like a portfolio of evidence that modular housing works, is reliant, and is safe. Furthermore, we have a second recommendation that builds on top of our first social housing one, especially when we have achieved economies of scale. Because then we can reduce costs and also pivot to more suburban areas, especially those with more high-rises. And indeed, we can not only build communities and social places for people to socialize in schools, hospitals, but also a place to have fun. But investors can also be ensured that the modular house will increase in prices, in value, especially when the density increases.
And then we also developed a tool for New York City, and it shows as well the black dots. They show where the residential areas are and where also the land is available from the city. And basically this tool allows to adjust different parameters to see where we can implement social housing. And that's, as I said, from selected residential areas as well as inside to investigate different filters like technical filters, zoning plans, and for the regulation.
Yes. So,
You have heard our recommendations, but how do we want to achieve it in the first step? What are our first steps? So first, we want to collaborate with important civil society stakeholders, such as NGOs, to overcome policy restrictions and gain a support base. Then, secondly, we want to collaborate with perhaps philanthropic investors, such as Warren Buffett, who has shown interest in modular housing units, in order to gain also the social investment. Then, general, when we have these addressed, then we can immediately also address demand as consumers gain more trust in these innovations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, the legends. Please welcome to the stage our next team to Cambridge.
My name is Kenzo,
My name is Kat.
and we are Team Cambridge.
We are from across the U.S. Regardless, it is apparent that the housing deficit is deepening everywhere.
So what solutions as well as what problems are we specifically looking at in New York City, in Boston, and across the country? First, it's reluctance to front costs. And second, its materials are really limited, expensive, and they're not really eco-friendly. So where does that push us? It pushes us to purchasing more expensive resources as well as not receiving adequate momentum. So we have a plan to achieve the momentum threshold as well as to provide recommendations that are both policy as well as people-centered designs. First of all, we want to pursue PDP loans, one that is periodic loans that will help purchase actual buildings. It increases motivations for governments and other developers to create buildings. But we also want to focus on people-centered places. What if we integrated a community center along with our modular designs? Look in the app, for example, inspired by assembly. When we can look at real time what our buildings look like, how much they cost, as well as what our carbon footprint is with every building that is built. Not only does it incentivize governments, but it incentivizes developers as well as our users.
Our plan ultimately means increased U.S. employment, increased affordable housing, increased clean air, compatibility with the community far more than other constructions that just put up a generic building, and decreased carbon emissions that ultimately result in strides toward a cleaner environment.
It's really important because every single time we look at data, we want to understand where are our costs coming from. Sure, it's the people that are building it. Sure, it's the resources. And sure, it really is the entire company itself. We're only trying to build one building at a time. But imagine if we could really build 50 buildings. Imagine if we actually had policy that bridged technology and it also bridged the people that live in them. Working with residents is really important, but we also looked into other alternatives.
Leave us when we say we thought of everything. We would like even hiring Boston Dynamics to perform all of our manual labor and ultimately spurring the robot revolution. Yet, we still find our proposed solutions that bridge community and technology to be the best at achieving our results.
Thank you so much.
Last month, I walked by a renovated building with a big trash truck in front of it. This is what we're doing for a long time. A lot of waste and extremely long time to complete. Now, imagine building a house by putting together blocks. Pretty like playing Lego, but this is what happened right now. With this new way of building, we only need half of the time, less cost, less waste, and also better for the environment. However, our rule needs to be changed to make it easier for our builder to use this new way of building.
So we have total 4 recommendations as per the policy. So our first recommendation would be flexible zoning policies. So the regular rigid policy, zoning policies are taking around 8 to 9 months, and we can reduce that at least to flexibility of 20%, which would add 30% reduction in the permitting permission delay. And what we like to look at is performance-based coding rather than material-based coding. So that way, if we adopt for performance-based building codes that focus on the impact of the materials and the energy efficiency, that would be very helpful in terms of modular housing. And our second recommendation would be revolving loan funds and leveraging state-provided state-backed loan system as well as grants, reducing the burden of high borrowing rates for the construction companies. And the tax incentives, if we can add a couple of tax incentives for the modular construction companies, that would help them in breaking even in the modular housing section. And the two recommendations are implementing large-scale modular pilot projects. So industrial partnerships, like there are established conventional housing partners who, if we can tap into their market and make them embrace the modular housing, that would really help in fast-tracking adoption of modular housing, as well as workforce development and transition. So for existing people who are already employed in the housing, I would suggest, we are suggesting retraining programming as well as for the new students, if they can tap into the government's apprentice work innovation programs, apprenticeship programs.
Thank you, Team Wing Wing.
Solutions that this challenge has. I'm going to present the fourth and last challenge that participants were over the weekend. At MIT, we believe highly that science and technology can solve, can help to solve most of the pressing societal challenges that we are facing right now. But science and technology isn't enough. We need to include all the population, and we know that there are a lot of difficult decisions that we need to do in that regard. So I think, and I know that because I speak with a lot of teams, that this can be very complex. So I invite you to welcome all these things that work very hard over the weekend, and that we know that this is a very complex problem, and we are pleased that you all work on this. So help me with a round of applause to welcome the first team that is presenting.
Good morning, everyone. We are Team 1 for the criminal justice track. We are Team Lava, proposing a sustainable system for sentencing review.
So there are over 95,000 incarcerated people in California. Some of these people deserve a second look, a second chance, due to their promise of rehabilitation. But there's so much data to sift through, so how can we choose these people? Well, we propose a public website featuring an interactive dashboard and a model for ranking candidates for review, as well as an accountability infrastructure that features incentives and small-scale mandates that encourage the use of our tool, as well as a review of such candidates. So on our website, there's first this interactive dashboard where data visualizations are featured, and for example, a DA could click on the county, for example, Los Angeles, and all of the graphs will filter to solely that county, and there's other filters such as offense, description, and category, and there's also a machine learning model for ranking the candidates with this interface that will has other indicators too, such as whether or not the DA has actually reviewed the case and a racial justice category.
So because the data is imbalance between those fact review and those no fact, we train a machine learning model called balanced random forest model. This model scores prisoners on how good they are for review to prioritize case reviews efficiently. We achieve high recall, ensuring that the majority of truly eligible cases are found.
In combination with this machine learning model, we also utilize a deterministic metric. This uses modified federal sentencing guidelines for an unbiased and agreed upon severity rating. It also uses exponential decay to weight prior convictions based off of severity and how long ago they occurred. And we have adjustable weighting, which empowers DAs and counties to make the decisions that are right for their counties. We also have a continuing evaluation of this metric and model. As humans interact with the model, the model will continue to be trained, and we will begin to have data with more labels. Additionally, we'll test it to account for bias and to equity, and methods will be transparent, and the code will be open source so that anybody can see what we're doing.
We have two concurrent policy systems. The first is a mandate system. We will require the DA office to review 50% or 5 high-scoring cases, whichever is fewer. This low requirement lowers the threshold for future review. We will require that the DA office provide data, not only about the prisoners, but about the eligibility requirements for the county, as that differs per county in California. We will also require that they release a yearly press release for public accountability, specifying the case numbers that they reviewed and the reasons for why they decided to pursue the case or did not. And just to be clear, for the review, just because the DA office reviews the case does not mean that the case will be resentenced or the defendant will be resentenced. This leads us to our next policy system, the incentive system. It is extremely expensive to incarcerate someone in California. Thus, resentencing people saves.
Thank you, Team Lava.
Thank you.
Justice for all.
Hello, everyone. We are Justice for All. My name is Ina. Oh, so sorry. Never mind. Well, as we know, I'm Ina. I'm Sam. And today we are going to talk about challenges and opportunities within the criminal system, and specifically focus on the state of California. Justice is one of the pillars of democracy. And when one of the pillars is damaged, we all have to take a second look and glance over our problem and try to repair it. This pillar has been challenged throughout history all the time. And just last century, in California, when the 3 strikes law passed, many people felt the harsh consequences of this law in their lives, and they're still continuing to feel these consequences. So, there are moments in life when we think we should pause and reflect. And today, we are here standing to shed light on people who deserve a second glance. We want to make them visible, and we want for their stories to be heard again.
As data scientists, we recognize both the immense value of data and the challenges of extracting actionable insights from large data sets. To address this, we propose a visual analytics tool designed to empower non-technical stakeholders to identify and address injustices. This tool enables users to explore specific counties, analyze the demographics of potential resentencing candidates, and compare their sentences to the average. A built-in chatbot will summarize findings, freeing stakeholders to focus on advocating for justice. By bridging the gap between data scientists and law enforcement, this tool drives informed decision-making for meaningful change.
All right, so as gaps and needs continue to be identified, the visuals in this are going to be updated as well. The visuals need to remain relevant for the individuals who are going to be using them the most frequently, people like the attorneys, the DA's office, and additional advocacy groups. Counties also need to be incentivized to use an already limited resource to review cases already otherwise closed. So we need to consider, can the money being spent keeping a nonviolent offender in prison be better spent elsewhere? Modification to an existing policy would also help to reduce the overhead required. So it would be extended to include all attorneys being able to initiate a review. So it would be AIR instead of PIR. PIR is the prosecutor-initiated resentencing, attorney-initiated resentencing. So I think that's what we've got.
Please welcome to the stage our next team, the Defenders.
Hi everyone, we are the Defenders, and we want to start saying we will all
would like to choose where we were born. This map shows the probability to end up in jail depending on where you were born. I don't know, but maybe you would like to be born in Sweden or something like that. So let's go to the next one. We see the problem with three different approaches. We have heterogeneous policies among counties. We have technical skills building by attorney defenders. But also we have bureaucratic holders. It's hard to access to the information. It's hard to understand the process. Legal things, sorry, lawyers. So we have two solutions. The bottom-up tools for everyone to understand what is going on with the data, but also we have top-down methodologies. So starting with the bottom-up interventions, we have an LLM-powered web app because we think that justice should be for everyone, even families or people that they don't understand law. So asking about the cases may be helpful for everyone. Having an easy app to understand what is going on with my case and what's the probability that I can be hardly sentenced. And the other is an interactive dashboard, especially mandate for district counties, so that they can understand how many distributions and how are the sentences distributions among what they want to do. It's important to say that this makes the project scalable because you can have two filters between, for example, age range or sentencing length or offense type, so they can understand how to scale the whole project and technology approaches. So for this next part of the solutions, we have a more robust model for the project. We have a recidivism risk so that we can understand how can people be ranked among all the susceptible people for second chances. But also we have an anomaly detection so that we can have a really high sentence for a specific offense that you can understand that maybe that was more hardly sentenced than another one. Based on different characteristics for the people, we can understand maybe that for someone that has really similar characteristics, they have a really large sentence. We think that with all these approaches, we can have both technology and public policy. Have technology, but also make it accessible, easier, scalable for everyone. We believe in justice to be easier, more approachable. So this approach has that both public policy, but also technology. Having a robust model, but also make it approachable with a dashboard. And that's it.
Please join me in welcoming our next team, Team Tamales.
Well, hello, we're Team Tamales, and we're going to show you our proposals. Before anything, I want you to come with a journey with me. First, imagine that you stay in this room for 3 more hours, then for a year, and then for 25 years. All the teams have explained about the problem of mass incarceration and harsh sentences, but they have not talked about the problem of quality of life in prison. This is what we're going to show you. So now, there are currently a lot of people in prisons that they are just serving harsh sentences and have poor quality of life. And this is costing approximately $53 million a year to California taxpayers. And this may be just numbers, but for 500 people, this is their lives. So we need to understand this problem more completely. Yeah.
So as we have discussed, mass incarceration, systemic inequalities, which of course includes the disparities in demographics of people in prison right now, but also means the different living conditions in prisons across the state and the country and how they can differ. But the problem we really want to address is this. There is a data analysis bottleneck. District attorneys' offices have to go through loads of inmate data to see who should be eligible for resentencing, which is time-consuming, prone to errors, and resource-intensive. As of pilot review last year for the PIR, as other teams have discussed, 72% of cases were under review for more than 6 months. And more than half of these people are also over the age of 50. This is very important fact, and this is why we have our recommendations. So applications like Redo, which is the sponsor of this hackathon, they should be recommended to DAs to use and should be more widely available and helpful. They should have a developed web app, which should be more intuitive data for the public, which is important for journalists to be able to spread this information, for families to know, which is basically community-based organizations. And the key aspect is that the DAs need to know, because these are the people that are making the decisions and they need to make them quickly.
Well, and this is not it. We know that DAs offer the categories of what cases they will take.
this shouldn't be it. We also offer we created the prison quality index. This index shows the quality of life that prisoners have in different states and different counties and different prisons. And we think this should be used alongside the criteria DAs use to make the decisions and to maybe move people that were previously not in the top of the list, but now they can be up in the list.
This is because these are the people that would benefit the most from the resentencing decision. And well, there are 500 people who are just like us right now, stuck in a room. So it is very important that we get this decision quickly and not just make the decision, but to actually rank them and prioritize who needs it the most. And that's it.
Please welcome to the stage our next team, Boston Legal.
So, hello everyone, thank you for joining us. My name is Leslie Rodriguez and I'm a part of Boston Legal, and I'm here to present on educational and interventional justice to inform decision making. And so to start off, the impact of the three strike law is actually on offenders is actually very clear. So we found literature supporting the notion that having a longer sentence doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to commit a crime again upon release. And so here we show that only 5% of current prisoners are in prison for the third strike. However, this still poses a huge economic burden on California taxpayers, costing up to currently right now $19 billion. And so with that, the way we framed and looked at this question is we focused on how can we actually target individuals to not commit the third strike offense in prison. So our first factor that we focus on is how can we reduce recidivism. So this is focusing on those second offense individuals, how can we find them and actually be able to target them to help them not commit that third strike offense. The second framework that we focused on is being a support system. So how can we help previous offenders rehabilitate into their normal life after imprisonment to facilitate an easier transition. And the third is addressing the lack of education. So we found literature supporting that many current offenders, criminal offenders, don't really understand the implications of longer and more serious sentencing laws, like the third strike law, making them vulnerable to being convicted under that. And so with that, our recommendations focused on one, improving offenders' education regarding the three strike law. And so we thought we would build educational models that are actually informing current prisoners on what the three strike law is, what crimes fall under it, and what it means if there potential candidates for that. And second is our second recommendation is AI data-driven assistance for recidivism likelihood score to inform intervention strategies. So for example, if we see that there is a pattern of a prisoner committing crimes that are related to drugs, we would implement them into a regulatory drug testing program in order to actually make sure that they have that accountability and are trying to stay away from that type of lifestyle. And so our third recommendation is providing counselors with training tools to facilitate rehabilitation programs. And this once again goes back to that accountability aspect. By having that emotional connection, they would actually be being held accountable for their own rehabilitation and be more invested in that. And so with that, here we have a sample of what type of information would be included in the classroom module. So here we have the second strike to the third strike. And so we can show current prisoners the increase in severity as increase in sentence length as we shift from the second strike to the third strike.
Thank you, Boston Legal. The Lions.
Good morning. Our approach to improve the California resentencing process was planned with equity in mind to create a fair and more transparent justice system.
AB 2942 is a law that allows district attorneys to review and recommend resentencing for certain individuals that meet a given criteria. This criteria varies even by county. Through some data analysis using the open source database created by Review.io, we determined that there is a statistically significant difference in the mean sentence time, even after you, for people of different ethnicities, even after you account for sentence type and offense category. So this shows us that there appears to be a racial bias in the aggregate sentencing. The DAs review and recommend cases for resentencing, which could introduce implicit bias. There is also an overwhelming lack of public transparency in the resentencing process, which is one of the things Review.io is trying to combat.
So our data analysis uncovered significant disparities. Like as you can see, the graph on the left shows individuals from minority ethnic group backgrounds that have systematically received harsher sentences for similar offences compared to others. And on the right, we can see that the graph includes non-violent crimes like property crimes, drug crimes, and other crimes, and excludes sentence types like life without parole as a first trial. By using a logistic regression model with an accuracy of 81%, we were able to find that the Black, Mexican, and the Jamaican individuals are significantly less likely to be considered for resentencing. And this highlights the existence of bias and in the current process, which underscores the need of proposed changes.
So to tackle these issues, we propose 3 policy changes. Our first recommendation is to create community review boards to assist in the resentencing process. By establishing independent panels composed of members from diverse backgrounds, we aim to reduce the biases that currently exist in the decision-making process. Our second recommendation is to perform data monitoring. We recommend mandated collection of data on certain demographic areas. And then our third recommendation is to implement implicit bias training. So prosecutors and judges have less biases when resentencing.
So we know that while requiring bias training and putting together a community review board and eliminating bias from the resentencing assessment are more difficult, these are very critical steps towards creating a more equitable system.
Thank you, Alliance. Please welcome to the stage our next team, the Reachables.
Good morning. So we're going to talk about how to streamline case reviews for sentencing, specifically talking about crime-related non-violent cases. So when we talk about California's incarceration population, it is actually the biggest population of a democratic state. And one of the factors that impact this population is the applicability of the 3 Strikes Act, which basically is a legislative act that harshly sentences according to your prior convictions. So how do we streamline the review process to help lessen this population and identify the individual cases that need to be put first? So we developed a 4-step framework of justice reform that will be applicable along with the already existing model. It has, as I said, 4 steps. The first step is the proportional deviation calculation that automatically flags inequitable sentencing. The second will be applying the alternative metrics that can influence the sentencing, such as political factors, social factors, and economic factors. And then we want to apply or create an alternative pathway for nonviolent offenders who can be eligible for a diversion program, which this would help in the social rehabilitation process. And finally, implementing a systematic review after 5 years post-conviction to increase the participation and expand eligibility for sentencing.
So how does this look? First, we would filter the non-violent cases, and we would use the statutory guidelines that tell you how long should a sentence be, and we compare them with the offense severity, which is the strikes that they get, and that sum would be compared to the actual sentence that they get, the current sentence that they are given, and that gets us the calculation deviation percentage. So if they get a significant deviation, then they are flagged automatically for review, and they can be then filtered through the already existing model to see if they are eligible for the resentencing. But additionally, you would run through another criteria to see if they are eligible for the diversion program. And furthermore, it would also help identify which trends can be seen in certain crimes. For example, if there's a crime that it is being more harshly convicted according to like the deviation, there's a trend of the crime generally, not just like individual cases.
Thank you, the reachables.
My name is Mubarak, and I'm here to represent Team Suits. We're talking about data-driven tools for identifying reform-eligible cases. So when you look at this board right now, what you see right here are different numbers, like a bunch of numbers bundled together. But what I see right here is basically numbers that are the identification numbers for prisoners in the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. And some of these numbers here are for people who literally deserve a second glance at their cases. And so we went back to our drawing board and we thought about the judicial policy problem that we have here and how we are going to use data-driven insights to form or to enhance judicial decision making. And so our solution integrates two simple frameworks. The first one is an eligible scoring system, and the second one is an R-Shiny board, dashboard. And basically, these two things help to streamline candidates' evaluation. And I can tell you that in less than 24 hours, we tested over 95,000 cases, and we found potentially 15% of them that are eligible for a second look. And so this helps to show clear patterns of racial disparities that requires immediate attention. So in order to create graph-based visualization that gives easy access to the non-specialist audience, such as the prosecutors, defenders, as well as the affected individuals, we developed a dynamic data visualization software that can be used to visualize different variables of the data against each other, as shown here. Also, we created an eligibility determination system. And this system does something very interesting. It incorporates a point-based algorithm so that when you happen to check the CDC number, that is the California Department of Correction number for the prisoner, you run it into our system, and what it does here for you to check the eligibility. Now, what does it do here? It basically shows you that this is a very easy-to-use interface that doesn't need any very heavy technical know-how. So that way, you're going to see different parameters such as the severity, the repeats, the sentence, as well as the enhancement points. And this differently gives all those things. And so our recommendations are basically to deploy this system to pilot counties, to train legal practitioners on the usage. We plan to also scale this statewide to all 58 counties in California. And then we want to create a unified framework review. Importantly, we want to develop rehabilitation-focused programs so that we are more proactive rather than reactive. And then we also want to be able to ensure scalability for future reforms so that we can not just do this in California and put this to all the different states in the United States. Thank you so much. And this is Team Sue.
Please welcome to the stage our final team for this year's.
Have you ever wondered how attorneys decide on which cases to consider when giving a second look? Video created a platform that enables users to access a list of incarcerated individuals who may be eligible. What if we let attorneys rank this list? Or even change the court system? Or maybe even ask for more data? Thousands of Californians are currently incarcerated and may be eligible to be released, but are still fulfilling their full sentences. To address this problem, we propose building a digital application that will help users prioritize which cases to examine based on the user's preference. Further developing the core system to include a community judge to offer a diverse perspective on sentencing. And expanding on data collection efforts to other states.
Yeah, so. So yeah, okay. I work every single day with lawyers, and I know they simply do not have the time to look through 500 cases and decide who is eligible for parole. What we decided to set up, much like other groups, is we decided to make it so that lawyers could rank them based off of their own classification schema to figure out who they should first address. And then also, we added data plots so that they could see for that ranking if there are any disparities between them.
So for the alternatives, the issue with this is like the ranking systems include like some biases, and then community judges. There is also going to be some bias in there, but it also represents a community advocate that will be more representative of the average person who's going into these court cases.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much. I think that's it. That's all the teams. I just wanted to mention that this is just a presentation. I know that you all also deliver a write-up or a policy memo where that's also the judges are going to consider. So if you have any other material or any other thing that maybe you didn't mention in your slides, they're gonna go through all that content also. But it's also important to know that a presentation in this kind of fields is very important because sometimes that's what you have. Your 3-minute speech to convince someone that some idea is good to pursue. So yeah, I think this was a very good exercise. I know that a lot of you were very nervous. So I wanted to give a round of applause to all of you.